The church bells rang softly, but each sound felt like a crack splitting my chest open again. I stood beside a small white casket that looked too light, too wrong, like it belonged to a doll instead of my son. Ethan was 12 years old, 12. His hands had once been warm and always reaching for mine, his laughter loud enough to fill the house. Now there was only silence, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on everyone in the room. I kept glancing at the front pew. 3 empty seats stared back at me. My parents' seats, I told myself they'd be late. My mother was always late. I imagined her rushing in, mascara smudged, whispering apologies. I imagined my father's stiff hand on my shoulder, awkward but present. I clung to those thoughts because the alternative, that they chose not to come, was unbearable. Friends surrounded me. Neighbors I barely knew hugged me tightly. Ethan's teacher cried openly. His best friend clutched a folded piece of paper, a letter he'd written but would never get to give. Yet the people who were supposed to love him most weren't there. When the pastor began speaking about Ethan's kindness, my knees trembled. He talked about how Ethan stayed behind after school to help a classmate who struggled with reading, how he once gave away his birthday money to a child fundraiser without telling anyone. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood, afraid that if I let myself cry, I'd never stop. The casket was closed. I couldn't bear the idea of seeing him like that. I wanted to remember him alive barefoot in the backyard, racing his shadow, asking endless questions about the stars. As the service ended, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Hope sparked painfully in my chest. I stepped aside and looked down. "Mom, we couldn't make it. Lily needed us today. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no mention of Ethan's name." My hands shook as I locked my phone. The room spun, and I had to grip the back of a chair to steady myself. My sister needed them, again. Somehow, even on the day my son was laid to rest, she mattered more. At the cemetery, as the casket was lowered into the ground, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of fresh earth. I dropped to my knees, pressing my palm against the grass. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'll always be here." When everyone left, I stayed behind, alone with the mound of soil that now separated me from my child. The sun dipped low, shadows stretching long and cold. That was the moment something inside me changed. Grief didn't just take my son that day. It took my parents, too. Grief has a strange way of reopening old wounds. In the weeks after Ethan's funeral, memories I thought I had buried long ago began surfacing, memories of a childhood where love was unevenly measured and affection was awarded like a prize I never won. Losing my son didn't just leave me heartbroken. It stripped away the illusions I had worked so hard to maintain about my parents. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't cause trouble. Lily, on the other hand, was the dreamer. The spark, if she wanted something, my parents found a way to give it to her, even when it meant taking it from me. When Lily failed a class, they blamed the teacher. When I brought home straight A's, they nodded and asked if I could help Lily study. When she decided she didn't want to work anymore and needed time to find herself, they covered her rent. When I struggled as a single parent after my divorce, they told me hardship built character. I learned early not to ask for much. When Ethan was born, something shifted, at least for a while. My parents smiled more when they visited. My mother held him like he was fragile glass, and my father taught him how to whistle. I allowed myself to hope that Ethan would receive the love I never fully did. But hope, I learned, was temporary. As Lily's ambitions grew more expensive, my son faded into the background. Birthday calls turned into rushed messages. Promises of visits were forgotten. Holidays were rearranged around Lily's schedule, never Ethan's. Still, Ethan adored them. He drew pictures for my mother and insisted we mail them. He asked why Grandma and Grandpa couldn't come to his soccer games. I lied for them every time. They're busy, they love you. I didn't want him to feel what I had felt second place. After his death, the silence from my parents grew louder than any argument ever could. No check-ins, no shared grief, no acknowledgement of the loss we supposedly shared. 2 weeks passed before they finally called. My father's voice was stiff. "We should come by. There are things we need to discuss. I cleaned the house out of habit, then hated myself for it. Ethan's room remained untouched, frozen in time. His sneakers still sat by the door. His jacket still hung where he left it. When my parents arrived, they didn't look broken. They looked uncomfortable. My mother glanced around, avoiding Ethan's room. My father sat straight, backed on the couch. Hands clasped like this was a meeting he wanted to get through quickly. They didn't ask about my nightmares. They didn't say his name. That was when I realized something devastatingly clear. Blood might make you related, but it doesn't make you family. And whatever they had come for, it wasn't to mourn my son. I should have known why they were really there the moment my father cleared his throat. He always did that when he was about to say something unpleasant, something he believed was reasonable simply because he had decided it was. My mother folded her hands in her lap, eyes fixed on the coffee table like it held the answer to an unspoken question. We need to talk about Ethan's finances, my father said. The word finances felt obscene in my living room, surrounded by grief and unopened condolence cards. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. What finances? I asked quietly. My mother finally looked up. The account, we know about the inheritance. $1.5 million is a lot of responsibility. The air left my lungs. They weren't here for comfort. They weren't here to grieve. They were here for money. That money was for Ethan, I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to stay calm. For his future, my father nodded as if humoring a child, and that future is gone, which means the money should be redirected wisely. Redirected? My mother leaned forward, lowering her voice as if she were sharing a kindness. Lily has been struggling. She's finally found something she's passionate about. A wellness retreat. It could be her chance to build something meaningful. I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound was sharp, broken, and unfamiliar. You skipped his funeral, I said, and now you want his money to fund my sister's dream. My mother sighed. That's not fair. You know how sensitive Lily is. I felt something tear open inside my chest, sensitive. As if my son's death was an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. That inheritance doesn't belong to you, I said. And it certainly doesn't belong to Lily. My father's jaw tightened. You're being emotional. Of course I was. My child was dead, he continued. You already have a house, a job. Lily needs this more. Needs. The word echoed in my mind, dragging every memory with it. Every time Lily needed something and I was expected to give it up. But this time, they weren't asking for my sacrifice. They were asking for my son's. I stood up, my hands shaking. Get out. My mother's eyes widened. Don't be dramatic. I buried my child. I said, you missed it. You don't get to sit in my home and tell me what he would have wanted. They left angry, offended, convinced I would come around. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that months before his death, Ethan and I had talked about helping others. That the money had already been secured in a trust, protected from exactly this kind of greed. And they didn't know that by demanding it, they had crossed a line they could never step back from. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to give in, not this time. They called 3 days later. My phone lit up with my mother's name, and for a brief moment, I wondered if grief had finally reached them, if they were calling to apologize, to say my son's name out loud for the first time. I answered anyway. We've been thinking. My father said, skipping any greeting. You're not in a position to manage that kind of money alone. We're family. This should be handled together. Together, the word felt hollow. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply said, do whatever you think you need to do. They took my calm as weakness. A week later, letters started arriving, legal language, formal requests, thinly veiled threats. Lily sent messages too. Long ones, emotional ones. She talked about how hard her life had been, how this opportunity would finally make her happy, how Ethan would have wanted to help her. That was when I stopped reading, because I knew exactly what Ethan would have wanted. The following month, my parents were invited to a small ceremony at Ethan's old school. They went proudly, assuming it was related to the inheritance they believed they were about to claim. They sat in the front row when the principal stepped up to the podium. Today, she announced, The school was unveiling the Ethan Memorial Program, a scholarship fund, tutoring center, and grief support initiative for children who had lost family members. She spoke about a young boy who believed kindness mattered more than money, and generosity mattered more than recognition. Then she thanked the trustees. My parents' smiles froze when my name was read aloud. The lawyer explained everything afterward. The inheritance had been placed into an irrevocable trust. The funds were already allocated education grants, hospital programs, playgrounds, and community centers. Lily's name was nowhere on the paperwork. There was nothing left for them to demand. My mother cried not for Ethan, but for what she believed had been taken from her. My father accused me of betrayal, of humiliation. I listened quietly. Then I said the only thing that mattered. You taught me family comes first. I just chose the right one. I walked away before they could respond. On the first anniversary of Ethan's passing, I stood in a park filled with laughter. Children ran across a playground built in his honor. Parents sat on benches, watching, smiling, holding hands just a little tighter. A small plaque shimmered in the sunlight, in loving memory of Ethan, who believed the world could be gentler. I placed my hand over my heart and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. My parents never called again. Lily stopped messaging. The silence they left behind no longer hurt. It healed, because my revenge was never about taking something from them. It was about making sure my son's life, short as it was, meant something beautiful, and in the end, love outlived their greed. So did the truth.